Welcome to our explainer. Today, we are diving headfirst into one of the most intense and honestly, one of the most fascinating theological debates inside of Christianity: the timing of the rapture. We're going to break down a sermon by Dr. Andrew Woods that really unpacks this whole controversy.
So here's the thing. The central question that fuels this entire debate isn't really if the rapture will happen. Most Christians believe the church will be caught up in some way. No, the real conflict, the one that has sparked over 100 years of argument, comes down to one simple word: when. When is it going to happen in relation to that prophesied 7-year tribulation period?
So here's our game plan. We'll start by really framing the when question. Then we'll map out all the different timing theories. After that, we'll look at why one particular view is so fiercely criticized. We'll examine the rebuttals to those attacks. And finally, talk about how you can find some certainty in the middle of all this controversy.
Okay, let's get right to the heart of it. When you look at all the complex charts and the passionate arguments in Bible prophecy, so much of it really just boils down to that single, powerful word, when. The real division isn't about what happens, but the precise timing of it all. So on one side, you have the what, the basic belief that the church will be caught up to meet Jesus, something rooted in passages like 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. And on this, there's pretty broad agreement. But on the other side, you have the when, and this single question is the source of all the theological firework. So, to really get a grip on this conflict, we kind of need a map of the theological landscape. Let's take a look at the different positions people hold on when this whole event is supposed to take place. This timeline pretty much lays out the 5 major viewpoints. First up, you've got the pre-tribulation view, which argues the church is taken out before that 7-year period even starts. Then there's mid-tribulation, placing the event at the exact 3.5-year mark. The post-tribulation view says no, the church goes through the whole thing and is raptured at the very end. Then there's a fourth view, pre-wrath, which says the rapture happens sometime in the last half, but before God's final, most intense wrath is poured out. And finally, you have the partial rapture theory, which suggests that believers are raptured in stages, not all at once.
Now, the speaker whose sermon we're exploring, Dr. Woods, is firmly in that first camp. He argues that the church will not experience a single moment, not 1 nanosecond, of the tribulation period. And it's this specific position that, as we're about to see, attracts some of the most intense criticism.
One of the key scriptures for this view comes from John chapter 14, verse 3, where Jesus says he's going to prepare heavenly dwellings for believers. So proponents ask a pretty logical question. Why would Jesus spend 2,000 years preparing homes in heaven if believers are raptured only to turn right around and come immediately back down to earth? It seems to imply a much longer stay is planned.
Now, this is where the debate gets really intense. What's fascinating is the sheer hostility that the pre-tribulational view attracts. And not from skeptics outside the faith, but from really prominent figures right inside Christianity itself.
For example, you have Rick Joyner, who is a leader in the New Apostolic Reformation. He claims this doctrine is actually a tool of the enemy, specifically designed to make the church passive and cause it to just retreat from engaging with the culture.
A scholar named Barbara Rossing uses even stronger language. She calls the teaching a racket, like a crime syndicate. She argues it's a totally unbiblical theology that just distorts God's true vision for the world. And then you have a highly respected apologist like William Lane Craig, who just dismisses it all as fiction. He actually compares believing in the pre-trib rapture to thinking The Lord of the Rings is a book of the Bible. Basically, a good story, but one with absolutely no theological basis. And others, like Rick Wiles, they take it even a step further, linking it to a so-called Zionist plot. He calls the doctrine a two-headed monster that he blames for America's moral decline. So you see, the opposition isn't just academic, it's visceral, and it's often loaded with some really harsh accusations. So when you're faced with such powerful and varied attacks, how do people who hold the pre-trib view even respond? Well, Dr. Wood's sermon addresses these criticisms head-on. First, let's take that charge that the doctrine creates an escapist or retreat mentality. The rebuttal here is a pretty striking piece of history. Dr. Tim LaHaye, the co-author of the insanely popular pre-trib-themed Left Behind series, he was the actual person who suggested the idea for the moral majority to Jerry Falwell. That's one of the most significant Christian political movements of the 20th century. That's hardly cultural retreat. Okay, so what about the other big one? The charge that it's just unbiblical fiction, some new invention from the 1800s. Proponents argue that this criticism often prioritizes church tradition over the biblical text itself.
They contend that the pre-tribulational view isn't some new invention, but it's the natural result of applying a consistent, literal interpretation to the Bible's prophetic passages.
So this brings us to a really crucial question, right? With all these respected Christian leaders in such stark disagreement, how is an average person supposed to find any clarity or confidence in what they believe?
And this is really the sermon's ultimate point. The goal isn't to live in confusion or just, pick a side based on your favorite teacher. Instead, the speaker argues the debate itself should drive every single believer back to the source material, to study the scriptures for themselves and build a conviction based on their own understanding of the text.
Ultimately, this topic isn't meant to be a doctrine of ambiguity or fear. The speaker really emphasizes that the Bible presents it as a blessed hope, something that's intended to provide comfort and encouragement to believers, not something to fuel endless debates.
And that leaves us with a final thought that really extends beyond just this one topic. When experts disagree so profoundly, the path forward isn't to give up in confusion. It's really a call for personal investigation, to go beyond all the arguments and discover the truth for yourself, straight from the source.